Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the next instalment of the Club Development webinars. This evening, we will be discussing and going through the RFU Community Club Insurance cover. However, before we get underway, I just want to run through a few slides. You should be able to hear me. If you can't, or well, you won't know if that you can't, but if you can't, check your connection. Sometimes switching in and out, making sure that you turned off everything else in the background will be good. Please, this evening, please use the chat function. Any questions, please use your name and your club and what your role is, but use it to ask any questions of the presenters or anything that you want to put in there, and we'll try and get through those questions this evening if we can, or not. We will come back to you with those answers after the webinar. Again, if you're experiencing any technical differences, please try another web browser. We tend to find, and I've been told, that Chrome works best, but please do use it. I've also noticed at times that if you can get into it on your phone, sometimes easier than you can your laptop if you are experiencing difficulties. So please do try different web browsers. This evening is going to be about the Community Club Insurance cover that the RFU has in place through Howdens and RSA, and Andy Goldberg from Howdens will take us through that in due course. Again, just for those, welcome this evening, and I hope you are all doing well. But you should be able to hear me, and if you can't, please check your connection, and you should see that on the screen. At this point, I'll also say you can watch this in widescreen if necessary, but we will do some chat function throughout and some polls throughout the evening. If that is the case, you won't see the polls if you're in full screen. Please use the chat function, which is there. Please use your name, your club, your role. Please share anything in there that you wish. Ask any questions. We'll endeavour to answer them either as we go or at the end. But this session is being recorded, and we will send that out to you after the event. Any technical difficulties, please try using another web browser. Clearly, at this moment, with all the lockdown and lots of people working from home, internet usage is massively up, and occasionally that can create difficulties. But if you are try a different browser, we tend to find Chrome works best. But if you are having difficulties, try a different one. Right, just a final slide before I hand over. Just a bit of housekeeping. If you have any technical problems throughout the evening, please, again, try a different browser or aspects such as that. However, any questions or any thoughts, please pop them in the chat function. We'll endeavour to try and answer them as we go, if we can. We may try and pull a few out at the end of the session, and which hopefully Andy will be able to answer. And if we have left anything unanswered, we will get those back out to you. There are information in the resources section in your top right hand of the screen, which you can access as well. And again, you'll have access to this afterwards. The whole session is being recorded this evening, including, and that will also be sent out to you after the event, so that you can again watch it at leisure, or it can be accessed by others who may need to see it in due course. That will include all the chat function and also all the resources. We aim for this to take around about 45 minutes this evening. That may depend on the number of questions we get, but that's what we're aiming for, and hopefully you will enjoy it. So, without further ado, let me move on to the session. So, I'm going to introduce to you Andy Goldberg, who is the Divisional Director of Howdens sport and entertainment. And Andy and I have worked together over the last 3 or 4 years, and he sort of helps manage this, manage the community club's insurance. So, Andy, over to you.
Thanks, Dave. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for taking the time to come and join us this evening and take part in this. As Dave said, I work in the sport and entertainment division of Howden, where I've got responsibility for arranging the insurances that the RFU puts in place for the registered community clubs from level 3 and below. What I'm going to do today is, or what I'll do this evening, is take you through an overview of what those insurances are. So what covers are provided for you by the RFU through that centrally arranged scheme. And just have a discussion as well about the impact that the coronavirus pandemic has had on those insurances. As has been said many times, it's an unprecedented situation that we're in. And I think it's important for you as clubs to understand the insurance and the impact that the pandemic has had on that insurances, but also the responsibilities and duties that you have as clubs and as committee members running clubs to make sure that things are being done in a way that means that you maintain that insurance cover going forward. Towards the end, I'll talk a little bit about some of the insurances that you don't get centrally through the RFU, and then I'll be asking for your help at the end around trying to put together some packages to make sure they're absolutely bespoke and as appropriate for clubs as we possibly can do. What we're going to start with, though, is, and this is partly to get you involved early doors as well, is we're going to do a couple of quick polls around what the insurance cover costs and what type of claims can come and what type of claims can be dealt with by it. So just starting off, what we've got here is just a scenario at a club where we've had a situation where a spectator fell through some railings while he was watching a game. He suffered a relatively minor head injury. There are 3 options there, and what I'll do now is, Alex, if you want to take over for a poll, we'll get your views as to how much you think was paid in terms of compensation.
Thanks, Andy. So that first poll has now been launched and with you. What do you think? You know, how much do these claims cost? These are real claims that come through. A spectator fell through, damaged railings while watching a game. Has the claim cost 200,000, 75,000, or 15,000 and stuff? If you are in full screen, you will need to come out of it to see the poll and the chat function. And, you know, please do put any questions in that chat function throughout. So hopefully, you know, 3 short answers. I'm going to gather those results in just a few seconds. So I'm going to gather those now. So last few things that people come in. Okay. And 7.4% think it was 200,000. 74% think it's 75,000. And 18.5% think it's 15,000. Andy, which one was it?
Thanks, Alex. Well, the vast majority of people have got that one right, in that it was £75,000, right down the middle. What's the interesting thing with regard to this claim is the guy fell through the railing. The reason the club ended up being held responsible, and the reason why the £75,000 was paid in compensation, was because the club couldn't evidence that they'd done a risk assessment of the balcony where the spectators were standing, and hadn't identified that it was a risk. So whilst the club obviously knew their area very well, there was no written risk assessment, and so the insurance ended up paying on that one. Just moving on to another quick one for you then. This is a circumstance, this situation that happened in a committee room. There was a meeting, an elderly lady was sitting as part of the committee. A coach came in, put his kit bag just behind her chair. So when she stood up, she turned around and fell over it. She suffered a leg injury as a result of that. Compared to the £75,000, do you reckon this one was a higher level of compensation or a lower level? Alex, back over to you.
Okay, that's with you now. Let us know, you know. Is it higher or lower and stuff? Thinking about an elderly lady tripped over a coach's bag in the meeting room. Higher or lower? Last few seconds, just to that. Reminder, if you're in full screen, you do need to come out to see these polls and give your thoughts. So I'm going to gather those poll results now. Okay. And 40% think it's higher, and 60% think it's lower. What was it, Andy?
It's a reasonable assumption, I think, to think that this one is going to be lower, but this one was actually quite considerably higher than the last one. The compensation paid on this one was getting close to £350,000. There's a lot to unpack with that. It was a relatively minor injury, but what we've got with regard to this lady is she was effectively the main carer for her son. And as a result of her not being able to care for him anymore, the big bulk of the costs that came as part of this claim were on the back of the additional costs that were involved in being able to replace the lifestyle and the care and manage all of the things that were going on behind the scenes that she wasn't able to do any longer as a result of the injury that she'd had. A little bit unfair of me, I appreciate, because obviously you didn't have all of the information. But what I wanted to show with that was, again, with this one, the club had done a risk assessment. They knew and had appreciated that people can trip over stuff, and it's always the very, very simple things that cost the most money. The risk assessment for the committee meeting, for the committee room, had identified that it was appropriate for people to have somewhere safe to put their bags, and there was a rack at the end of the corridor where people could put their kit. Problem with this one was that the coach didn't put it there. So again, the reason I include this, apart from the fact that it's a really high settlement and it's a bit shocking, which is always entertaining, there's the idea behind the club had done the risk assessment, but they hadn't actually followed what they'd put in place. And because they hadn't followed it, they ended up still being responsible. One more of these, just to keep you on your toes. This relates to an on-field injury, actually. This is a guy who was taking part in a competitive match who suffered a spinal injury and unfortunately was left wheelchair-bound as a result of it. So the last one was £350,000. In this case, do we think it was higher or lower than that, Alex?
Okay, that poll's with you now. This is the last one, just to get us thinking, about a variety of things that actually are happening in rugby clubs and claims that are coming in. Do you think this one is higher or lower? So we'll just do this one quickly, and I'll gather those results now. So last little chance to put in, do you think it's higher or lower than the last one? Okay, and 48% think it's higher, and 52% think it's lower. Andy, what was it?
Thanks, Alex. Those numbers are familiar. It's pretty much 50-50. With this one, with a spinal injury, and with that kind of catastrophic injury that's going to have a life-changing effect on somebody's quality of life going forward, those kind of costs can get up to the 6, 7 to 10 million pounds. In this particular case, however, there was nothing paid at all. And the reason I mentioned that, and the reason I've added this one in here, is just to make the point that accidents can happen. This one was on field. It's a risk of taking part in the game, unfortunately, and nobody had done anything wrong, so there was absolutely no responsibility and no liability on anybody's part. Again, with off-field claims, accidents do happen, and there's always going to be a situation where just because somebody's injured doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to get compensation. But again, where they are injured, and going back to the previous claims, even if they're just accidents, risk assessments, having copies of those risk assessments and following them is what's going to help protect you as a club. Overall, there's some figures that are on your screen at the moment that will give you an idea of the kind of costs that are involved in the claims that are paid under the RFU policy overall. You can see we're looking on average somewhere in the region of about £800,000 a year. Costs are going up, the costs of claims are increasing. But I give you this just to put a little bit of context around the idea of the type of injuries that can happen, but also the kind of costs that can be involved with those as claims are made. So turning to your actual insurance cover as it is, the good news right from the get-go is that the insurance cover that's provided by the RSA and that's arranged by the RFU for the community game hasn't changed as a result of the pandemic. The fact that we now have COVID-19 and the coronavirus to deal with, it's a new risk and it's a risk that needs to be managed, but it hasn't changed the insurance cover that's provided by the RFU. So you still have the same levels of cover that I'll come on to in a minute, but you still have cover for the same things as you have done previously, albeit the way that you're delivering them, the way that you're doing them, and the way that they're being managed is going to be different now to what it was before. So rugby, as it stands at the moment, is very different to what it was 6 months ago. But the insurance protection is still there in respect of playing and training, whatever form that takes and how that develops over the next few months. Social activities, commercial and fundraising activities, again, they're going to look very different over the coming months to what they would have been 6 months ago, what they would have been this time last year. But as a club, you still have the protection to be able to do those as long as you're doing them in the right way. And with regard to your running of the club, your administrative, your managerial, and your decision-making processes, all of those activities are all covered still in exactly the same way. So in terms of limits and the types of cover that you've got provided, there's 4 main areas that are picked up under the RFU Community Game Insurance. First one is the public liability cover, and this is the one where the big claims can come from in terms of value. This is what we were talking about before with, this is what's protecting if your club is sued as a result of somebody sustaining an injury. So whether that's somebody, getting a brain injury or a spinal injury and they hold the club responsible, somebody tripping down the stairs. Absolutely the most common one that we see is people slipping on wet dance floors, on wet floors in bars. Unfortunately, it's actually less likely, fortunately I should say, but in general, it's less likely to happen at the moment because of how things are going. But it's those kind of little incidents that tend to rack up the claims, and that's what's covered under the public liability. The employer's liability cover is there to protect the club in respect of injuries that can befall employees or volunteers if people are working on behalf of the club. If they're injured while they're working for you and then they look to bring a claim against the club and hold you responsible, that's what your employer's liability cover is there for. Personal accident cover is there for players and for coaches whilst you're training and whilst you're playing, but it's there in case of the catastrophic injuries. So this again is if you have a player who suffers a spinal injury, suffers a brain injury, suffers an injury that means that they can't work any longer going forward, it's this personal accident cover that's going to pick that up. And the example that we had from a claim previously with the guy who broke his spine while he was playing a match, he didn't have a successful claim against the club, so he got no money through the liability insurances, but he did receive the £300,000 benefit through the personal accident cover because obviously what had happened was life-changing for him. That's exactly what that cover's there for. Finally, in terms of these, we've got the directors and officers insurance, and this is the cover that's there for you as committee members, for you as the people who are running the club, in respect of protecting your personal liability in case somebody tries to bring a claim against you for something to do with your management of the club. Now, that could be something to do with how you manage the finances, but realistically, it could be something to do with how you manage your response to a regulatory issue as well, and everything surrounding the virus and the pandemic, and COVID-19 kind of falls into that bucket as well. Now, all of this, there's a lot of information here, obviously, and all of this is put on the England Rugby Insurances website that we manage. So there's a whole load of information here, and it'd be interesting at this point just to kind of gauge how aware people are of this. And if you can just answer yes or no in a poll that Alex will run now as to whether you've ever used it, or whether you've ever been there and checked the information that's there.
Right, hang on. Just bear with me. I think we've lost Alex in terms. So I'm just seeing if I can actually launch the poll. If not, it may be that we put it into the chat function. I'm just getting to it. Sorry.
Andy, can you just crack on, Dave?
So it's poll. Which have you? Yeah, if you just crack on, I'll get to the stuff and come back to you.
That's fine. It wouldn't be right if we didn't have some technical difficulties while we were doing this, would it? So let's have a think about the virus itself. Let's look at COVID-19. What I said a few minutes ago was essentially it's a risk, and it's a risk that needs to be managed. But it needs to be managed in just the same way as any other risk that you've got, whether that's Legionnaire's disease in your changing rooms or the risk that somebody's going to fall down the steps outside the club. The most important thing essentially that you want to take away from this is that the insurance that's provided, the liability cover that's provided, protects you in respect of claims coming on the back of the virus in the same way as it would do if somebody fell down the stairs. So if somebody comes to your club and they take part in some training or they take part in a social activity that you're holding, if they then go away and they contract the virus, they get tested and they come back to you and basically say, I contracted the virus while I was at your premises and I'm holding you responsible and I want compensation from you. The insurance that the RFU's got in place will protect you as a club if that happens. But in order for that to happen, in order for you to have that protection, it's important that you are following the government guidance and the RFU guidance around managing that risk. And it's important that you've got that there and you're following, you're putting in place the risk assessments that you need to do in order to make sure that you're managing this and you're managing the social distancing and you're managing the hygiene requirements in order to make sure that if a claim comes in, the insurance is going to be held to defend you. Now, if a claim is made, there's obviously going to be quite a job for the person who's contracted the virus to prove in any way that they've contracted it at the club, as opposed to at the supermarket or at their friends or at another function that they've gone to. But the important thing is that the insurance is there in order to be able to protect you. Now, we were going to have another quick poll here.
Yeah, I can do it. I can do that poll, Andy.
Excellent, Dave. So this is just, again, we talk about the guidance from the RFU, from government. It's all about social distancing and hygiene. I was just interested at this point just to get an idea of how well you feel everyone's understanding it. How much is it clear? Is it confusing? Genuinely haven't got a clue what's going on. If you could just answer that for us, and we'll get a gauge on that.
Right, I'm just going to launch the poll, which should be with you now. So it should be with you. Give you a few moments just to ask that. Remember, if you're in the full screen, you'll need to come out of it to come out to see that. Okay, I am just now going to gather the poll results. Which is, it's very clear, is 78%, 22%. I find it confusing. And I shall publish those results to the audience, and you can see them on the screen now. You'll need to click out to get back into the thing. But yeah, Andy?
No, that's good. If my adding up is right, that means that no one said they didn't understand it at all, which is brilliant. There is a lot, and it is changing quite regularly. And whilst it's relatively simple and straightforward in terms of it's very much all about keeping the distance and making sure people are washing their hands and maintaining hygiene standards. It can get confusing because there's a lot of changes and it keeps moving on. What we've put together is some guidance and a white paper around what to consider when you're reopening your club after an extended closure. And there's bits within this around Legionnaire's disease when you've had standing water in showers and things like that as well. There's also some guidance in there around things to consider around the risk assessments. And the RFU have also, as you would expect, and I'm sure you've seen, put together a lot of guidance around both the insurance and the risk assessment piece for this. The two documents that you can see on screen, I have them now. They're in the resource area for you, so you can click through and get access to those. And there's more information as well, I'm sure, on the RFU website around their guidance and the risk management piece there. Changing tack slightly now, so we're not necessarily talking about the insurances that are provided through the RFU scheme now. But one of the big insurance topics that's been it's even made the news over the last few weeks since the lockdown happened is around business interruption cover. So this is the insurance that clubs will have as part of your club insurance combined type policies. So it goes along with your property and your equipment type insurance. And this is the type of insurance policy that will provide you with cover for income that you lose as a result of not being able to trade. So On the basis of what's happened, because of the shutdown, all of the clubs have had to close. Many clubs will have lost income as a result of that. And I'm sure many clubs have submitted claims to your insurers, your property insurers, on the back of trying to claim back that lost income under the business interruption policy. The standard position that, without exception, virtually all the insurers are taking is that these types of policies, business interruption policies, are not designed to cover a national emergency such as the outbreak of COVID-19. And essentially they're saying that the insurance policies don't provide cover for this type of loss of income. I'm going to come on to something that's happening at the moment that might have quite a big impact on this. But before I do that, again, just another quick poll. Can we just get an idea from you, in respect of your own clubs, how many of you have submitted a claim for income that you've lost as a result of the shutdown? Dave, if you can launch that one for us.
Yeah, just bear with me. Just getting to it, sorry. So again, ask the question, have you submitted a claim for loss of income? I am going to ask the poll now. Remember that if you are in a full screen mode, you won't see it, so you need to come out. So just give you a few moments to do that. Right, I will now gather the poll results, which is no 90% and 10% yes, and I'll publish those to the thing now. Okay, so if you'll need to remove that when we continue, but 90% have not made a claim of those on the call tonight.
Okay, thank you, Dave. So in that case, clearly a large majority of clubs haven't submitted a claim through under their insurance for loss of income. One of the reasons for that potentially could be that you haven't lost the income, which is brilliant if that's the case. It may be that there's a number of clubs, there's a number of you there who have seen the press and have seen what's going on with regard to this situation, and essentially taken the view that if the insurers are just declining all the claims, what's the point of submitting a claim because we're not going to get anything paid? Well, what's just about to happen is the Financial Conduct Authority, which is the regulator which runs all of this and oversees all of the insurances in the UK, is undertaking a legal review with a number of insurers and a number of different policies to actually determine, looking at some of the policy wordings, as to whether they should be responding to these claims or not. So any of you who have submitted a claim, you should be hearing back from your insurance advisors, your insurer directly, or your broker, essentially to tell you whether they feel that the outcome of this legal case will potentially impact on the settlement that you'd get under your policy. Basically to tell you whether, once the court have decided how the policy should respond, whether it's going to actually impact on whether your claim gets paid or not. But if there are those clubs out there, and if there are those of you who've taken that view of, yes, we've lost income, but to be fair, we weren't going to bother submitting the claim because they're all just being turned down, my advice would be get in touch with your insurer or your broker, go through the details and actually put something down, submit a claim. It may be ultimately that in the end, the insurers will still say it's not covered, but this is such a big review. There has not been anything like this in the insurance world, certainly within my lifetime, and for as long as I'm aware, there hasn't been this kind of a challenge on the insurance in the UK. It's definitely worth submitting the details if you've lost some income to see if you can get this considered as part of this whole review that's going on. That, along with anything else, I know hopefully there's questions being submitted through on the chat, and we'll try and pick those up as best as we can later on if we've got some themes coming through. So we've had a review of all the insurances that you've got as part of your central cover through the RFU. Just touching now on a last little section around some covers that you are provided for within the central scheme. And the reason for this is that they're much more bespoke to you as a club. They're much more specialist, and they've got to be much more tailored to what your needs are as a club. And they tend to be things that are based around your club itself. So your clubhouse insurance, cover for your contents, your property, your equipment, your business interruption, as I've just said. And again, depending on the size of the club, the type of activities that you've got, the size of your clubhouse, you might need more cover, less cover, higher limits, lower limits. What we're doing at Howden as the RFU's insurance broker for the community game is we're creating a bespoke rugby club property insurance package, and it's going to be tailored specifically for rugby clubs to make sure that it fits what you do, and it's as built for your needs as is possible. There's a number of different benefits that this is already including that we've worked through. So things like subsidence cover for your pitches, special covers for storm and flood that aren't dependent on the clubhouse being damaged. They kick in if the pitch itself is damaged without anything else happening. Cover for items outside that are left in the open all the time. Inclusion of things like protection for your data protection risks. We've got within the RFU, the England Rugby Insurance website that I showed you earlier on, there's access to a risk assessment portal, and there's risk assessments in there that you can complete for your clubhouse and your grounds. And moving forward, as we launch this product, completing that will enable you to get a discount on the property insurance on the basis that you can prove that you're doing the work in terms of the risk assessments. So it's only fair that you're rewarded with that in terms of actually saving some money on what you've got to pay for your insurances. And then things like cover for, if you lose income, if you lose your bar license, and various different bits and pieces along those lines. It's not completed yet, however, and we, as I say, we want to make sure it's as bespoke to rugby clubs and as bespoke for your needs as possible. So what we're hoping to do is put together a few little focus groups where we can really get your insight and really get your input. Again, this is probably the ideal time if you can just pop something in the chat to say if you'd be interested in taking part. And what we'll do afterwards is get back in touch in the near future with you and just see if we can sort something out. Again, it'll be remote. Much as I'd love to be able to come and sit and have a pint with you and do it over a beer, it's something that we're probably going to end up doing on a webinar or something like that. But it'll be really great if you can be involved and help us with that. So we've been through the insurances that you've got. We know now the covers that you've got that are in place from the RFU. Hopefully, if there are those of you that have had your income impacted by the virus and the lockdown, you know now to put a claim in, and hopefully you'll be able to work through those and get some good settlements out of those when the legal case is all reviewed. If you are happy to help us, we'd be really, really grateful for your input on that. And that brings me to the end of what I'm talking about. So we can hand over for questions. We've got a little bit of time left if there's anything that we want to pick up there.
Right, okay, thank you, Andy. I am going through the chat function. There's a few that I picked up earlier, so I'll put these to you and you can expand on them. So I think the first one is quite easy to answer. Do Howden have risk assessment templates clubs could use?
In terms of the general risks, that club space, so around your property, your premises, your car parks and different bits and pieces like that, yes, absolutely. And we've got a very, very simple online system which you can use, and you can access that through englandrugbyinsurance.co.uk. And again, the link will be in the resources for you, so you can get that through there. Specifically with regard to the coronavirus risks, we haven't put together a generic risk assessment for that. But again, if you go into the resources and have a look at the guidance note that we've got, that's got some very, very clear suggestions around the types of things that you want to be managing. And there's some risk assessment information in the RFU guidance as well.
Okay, thank you for that. So a second, these are coming slightly randomly, so I haven't managed to group them together. But a question from James: are there any conditions for the cover of training, i.e., need a qualified coach there, for example?
From an insurance perspective, no, we don't make those. We don't have anything that insists. We don't make any insistence around that from the insurance point of view. The one thing that we say in respect of the insurance is you need to be doing what the RFU guidance says you need to be doing. So with anything like this, my view is always, it's not the insurer's job to tell you how to play the game, to tell you how to train, to tell you how to run matches. You know the sport better than we do at all, and it would be wrong for us to try and impose bits and pieces like that. If there are conditions that the RFU puts or requirements the RFU puts on clubs, or guidance around how you need to be managing coaching sessions, just follow those and the insurance will follow behind it.
Okay, thank you. Another, I think it's a relatively simple question, but there was a question posted early doors that when we did the first 3 slides around the example claims, are they were covered by insurance. They are actually live examples. Is that correct?
Yes, it is. They're all live claims that we've had over the years.
And from rugby clubs?
The first one, the railings, was from rugby clubs. The second one wasn't. The old lady who fell over the bag wasn't at a rugby club, I'll be honest.
Okay. Thank you for that. Next question. Will the public liability insurance also cover any insurance claims for when the club uses third-party training facilities, or is this only for health and personal injury claims?
Where you're using third-party facilities, the liability insurance protects your club in exactly the same way. It works in exactly the same way as well if you're going to an away game, for example, if you're playing an away match. The public liability cover is protecting your liabilities. So it's protecting your club in respect of claims that are brought against it. Now, if you're in a third-party facility and you're using their training equipment, their training facilities, it could well be that somebody's injured and they look to bring a claim against your club, but their injury is as a result of something that's wrong with the facility where you're playing. If that's the case, what will happen is your insurers will take the claim on in order to defend you, but the defence will be, actually, it's nothing to do with our club, we were just there. That person was injured because they tripped over a pothole in the car park, and that's the responsibility of the facility where we were. So the liability policy that the RFU have in place protects you and protects you against claims made against your club. But it's not necessarily going to just pay if the responsibility isn't yours. If somebody else is responsible for what's gone wrong that's caused the injury, the claim will get passed across to them. Hopefully that's answered that question.
Yep, thank you, Andy. Just moving on to some of the business interruption questions that have been floating. There's a few in there. It's really, these are really based on, some clubs have obviously spoken to their brokers early doors or to their insurance companies, have been told no. Do you believe that there is that there might be opportunity following the FCA case to revisit those, or or a general thing?
There could be an opportunity to revisit them. One of the issues that clubs are facing, and one of the issues I think that probably the RFU faces in trying to give advice on this, is there are so many different policy wordings, and there are so many different insurers with a different approach to it. So there are certain policies that are going to have said we're not providing cover for the business interruption claim because the policy only responds to specific diseases. There's a list of diseases in the policy, and obviously coronavirus, COVID-19 isn't one of those diseases on the list. If you've got a policy like that, then unfortunately it's pretty cut and dried and you're not going to have the cover. Where this is a lot more ambiguous is there are lots of insurance policies out there that say that the policy responds to where you've had to close your premises as a result of a local authority imposition, a local authority that, some kind of, you've basically been forced to shut down as a result of a contagious disease, but it doesn't necessarily specify what the disease is. If you're one of those clubs, and if that's the kind of wording that you've got on your policy and you've contacted your insurers and they've already told you, no, we're not providing the cover, I would at that point recommend going back and saying to them, look, I'm aware that this review is going on. Is that review going to impact on my claim potentially? The FCA have made it an obligation of the insurers to actually proactively get in touch with everybody who submitted a claim and tell them whether they think the potential outcome of the court review could impact on the settlement of their claim. So, for example, we have a number of clubs that are insured with us, and we're going through a process at the moment of getting back in touch with all of the clubs that have submitted a claim to us to tell them, this is the policy that you've got. the insurers have been in touch, and the insurers have confirmed in a lot of cases, for example, and Hiscox is one of the insurers that's been mentioned quite a lot. So with the Hiscox cases, we're writing back to the clubs and saying, Hiscox have confirmed that your policy is affected by this, and the outcome of the legal review could impact on the claim that you've made. We'll be back in touch when this all runs out. And it's going to be a reasonably lengthy process when we go through the court case and the review, the legal review and potential appeals, etc. But we're getting back in touch with people proactively now to tell them whether they could potentially be affected. I think the short answer is, if your policy's got a list of diseases in it, then there's really no point, because it's not going to change anything. But if you don't have one of those policies, get in touch, speak to your broker, and get them to give you some advice on what the impact of it could be.
Okay, thank you. You also answered the second question there about the Hiscox, which is great. I dealt with that. I've got a couple in terms of the property. Well, the help that you asked. A question came in here: our club shares facilities with cricket and tennis. Is this insurance still suitable? I think you can. Have we lost Andy? Oh, I think.
Unfortunately, we've lost him. I think it looks like.
Oh no, he's back.
Sorry, don't know what happened there. Sorry, Dave. I missed the question. Can you repeat?
I was going to say, did the question concern you so much? Basically, I think this is in link. I mean, you can answer this question from both the public liability, but also possibly the new approach. There was a question in there about our club shares facilities with cricket and tennis. Is this insurance still suitable?
So from a public liability point of view, in terms of the cover that you get through the RFU, that's going to be specific to your rugby activities and the management of the rugby element of the club. From a property point of view, and what we were talking about towards the end as far as the new product, absolutely. We know that there's an awful lot of clubs that share facilities with different sports. You're really only going to need to have one policy that provides the cover for your clubhouse, if it's a clubhouse for a rugby club and a hockey club and a cricket club. But yes, absolutely, it should be appropriate for those. But that's the kind of information that we're looking to get out of the focus groups as well, just to make sure that we're picking up those elements of it.
Okay, good. And a question from our colleagues in the referee societies: is this aimed at clubs, or is there anything in place for referee societies?
From a liability point of view, the referee societies and the referees are covered under the same public liability policy. Mm-hmm. So absolutely, that applies to referees in exactly the same way as it applies to coaches, and it applies to clubs and players. I'd say the same applies to the personal accident cover as well. And if a referee was to unfortunately suffer some kind of catastrophic injury while they're refereeing a match, then they'd be entitled to the benefits under that RFU policy, that personal accident policy, in the same way as a player would be, for example. The one area I haven't touched on that we can do, in addition to the other insurances, which is kind of an extension of the personal accident cover, is a weekly loss of income protection, which we can arrange. We do that predominantly for clubs on a per team basis, and clubs can insure as many teams as they want through that in order to provide up to £300 a week for their players if they suffer an injury and it means that they're off work. That we have had inquiries from referee societies, and that's something that we can arrange for referee societies as well. So if a referee suffers an injury and it means that they're off work, then we can get them the same benefit through that as we can do for clubs.
Okay, thank you. And I've got a couple more, unless I'm missing something. Is there anything for? I think you may have just answered this, but is there anything for players' loss of earning through short-term injury? I assume that's the cover that you just mentioned in terms of teams, yeah.
Yeah, that's going to be the extra personal accident cover for loss of income. So the policy that we've got on a team-by-team basis can pay up to £300 a week, but that is specifically aimed for short-term injuries. So the kind of thing that's going to keep you off work for a couple of months, possibly.
Okay. And here's one bit more specific. In the instance of a reportable COVID case of attendee, would insurance cover the cost of deep cleaning?
No. is a very simple answer to that, unfortunately. No, it won't. That, unfortunately, is just a cost of doing business, cost of trading in the circumstances that we're in at the moment.
Okay. And then I think final one for now, unless I have a quick flick through. If and it's a different field. If you go on tour abroad, you are told you need a different type of insurance. I've heard that this also applies if you go into Wales and Scotland. Is this correct?
If you're going on tour, certainly if you're going abroad, you need travel insurance. And I'd argue probably now more than ever, you need to make sure that you're covered if you go abroad, and that covers you not just if you have an injury while you're playing, but it also covers you if you fall down the steps in the hotel and you need hospital treatment abroad, you'll be charged for it. So you need the travel insurance to cover the costs of that. Likewise, if you get food poisoning, you end up spending a week in hospital for whatever reason, it can cost a lot of money. So you need travel insurance to make sure that you've got that covered. That can also apply if you're touring in Wales, in Scotland, even if you're doing if you're doing a trip with an overnight stay in the UK, in England, you can get that cover around cancellation and different bits and pieces like that. Again, we've got a specific scheme that we arrange on behalf of the RFU. The details are available through the englandrugbyinsurance.co.uk website, and that's something that we're very happy to talk to clubs about as and when tours are being planned. And it would be good to know that there are tours going ahead and that people are going to be able to go abroad and play in the way that they had done before. So.
Okay, thank you. And then just one popped in the team by team insurance in terms of loss of income. Do you have to name the players?
No, there's an element of this where it's kind of a really old insurance principle called good faith. We will insure, say for example, if you get in touch and you want to insure your first team, we will insure your first team. But you don't need to name who all those players are. If somebody then suffers an injury and they're looking to make a claim, we'll be looking for confirmation that they're actually a member of the first team. Now, if you can obviously provide us with a team sheet to show that they played in the first team, then absolutely fine, we can get that sorted out. It's all done on good faith, and we trust that if you're going to insure your first and your seconds, but maybe not your third, fourth, and fifth team, then we're providing cover for those teams that are covered and not the ones that aren't. But no, is the simple answer. We don't ask for names. People move between teams, don't they?
Thank you for that. One general point: there's a number of people in the chat function asking to speak to you direct. I'm assuming we can use the insurance website to contact Howdens and speak to one of your team. That will be fine. They may not get you immediately, but they can always ask for you.
Absolutely.
And I've got one just popped in. Do or will clubs have to provide any type of certificates to say all is safe, etc., to act as assurance in relation to present climate? I think that's a slightly wider than insurance question, but if you want to give the insurance piece on that, Andy, that would be good.
Yeah, I mean, from an insurance point of view, I'm not aware that there are any certificates that you'd be able to issue, really, to an extent. It's one of those things. And again, going back to what I said earlier on, managing the risk of transmission of the virus is exactly the same as managing any other risk that you've got. You can do it to the best of your ability. You can take reasonably practical steps to try and keep people as safe as possible, but you can't necessarily eradicate it, and you can't guarantee that even if you've got the best and the most robust social distancing measures and barriers and hygiene measures in place, that no one's going to contract the virus. In the same way as you can do the most comprehensive risk assessment of your premises, you can't guarantee that no one's going to fall down the stairs. What the insurers are looking for, and ultimately what the courts are looking for when you're trying to defend a liability claim, is that you as a club can evidence that you've thought about the risk and you've done as much as you practically can do in order to be able to manage it. You do that through your risk assessments. It's really important that you document the risk assessments. It's really important that you keep a record of the risk assessments, because if you ever are challenged, that's what we'll be asking for. That's the piece of paper, the online equivalent. That's what we're going to be coming to you for, because that's what we'll use as evidence to show that you've been taking the reasonable steps. But that's really all that can be asked of you, and that's how you discharge your duty of care around all of this. It's not
Okay.
something to be scared of. It's not rocket science. It's not the most complicated thing in the world. It's just a question of taking reasonable steps and writing down the reasonable steps that you're taking, fundamentally.
Okay, thank you, Andy, for that. That was very comprehensive. And thank you for all of those that have joined us. That is all for tonight, folks. Hopefully see you again on the webinars in due course. And I think it's been popped into the chat function. Please, if you want to follow up anything with Howdens, the numbers and the contacts are there. Thank you.
Thanks everyone for taking part.